Bonjour, bonjour. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Glenn, for the kind introduction. Merci, France, aussi, pour ton discours et pour tout le travail de CAE. Je sais qu'il y a plusieurs personnes ici qui font partie, dans le fond, qui sont députés, sénateurs, etc. Je voudrais vous saluer. Of course, there's Stephen Fuhr here that I would particularly like to mention, and of course, my extraordinary parliamentary secretary, Carlos Letao. So thank you. I think they're worth a round of applause, guys. And of course, I would like to thank Kristen for her work. I think at this point, we can already say that CANSEC is a success. You know, I was here a year ago, and already we were talking about what we could do together in defense. But of course, we also know that Canada is right now living through a defining geopolitical moment. Over the past year, we've seen rising protectionism, growing economic fragmentation, and increasing instability among many of our closest allies and trading partners. The decisions coming out of Washington last winter made one thing unmistakably clear. Canada cannot afford to be passive in a world that is changing so quickly. But last winter was also an important moment because it marked a shift in our own approach. In Davos, the Prime Minister called on middle powers to step up, to develop a third way, providing hope and options to billions of people around the world. Un discours historique pour un moment historique. History reminds us that Canada rises to moments like this. In 1939, we entered the Second World War with limited defense industrial capability. And by June 1943, the Globe and Mail was reporting that 900,000 women and men, mainly women because men were on the fronts, were producing each week, 80 planes, 4,000 motor vehicles, 450 armored fighting vehicles, as well as ammunition, explosives, and more. And those efforts, and of course, alongside the service and sacrifice of more than 1 million Canadians in uniform, helped secure decades of peace, prosperity, and alliance leadership. And that generation understood something we must understand again today. Industrial strength is national strength. And so my point to all of you is we did it before, we can do it again. And a year ago, when I was before you at the time, we were talking about achieving our 2% NATO spending target. Well, good news, we were able to do so within also the last fiscal year. We also were able to do many things together. We signed the SAFE agreement with the European Union. We also signed a new agreement with the European Space Agency. The BDC launched its $6 billion financing initiative to support companies investing in Canada's defense sector, including companies like Photonic in Vancouver or Lastwall in Fredericton. I know Isabelle Hudon is here, so thank you. And I know Lisa Campbell also for the Canadian Space Agency is here, so thank you as well. And through Innovative Solutions Canada, the Department of National Defence alone has procured over $125 million for Canadian companies, mostly SMEs, since the month of March only. So, of course, also 3 months ago, imagine that, only 3 months ago, we launched our now famous Defense Industrial Strategy, the most important industrial strategy since the Second World War. Why do I say that? Because it has the biggest budget, $500 billion to create 125,000 new jobs across the country. La stratégie industrielle de la défense est la plus importante stratégie industrielle de notre histoire depuis la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Parce qu'elle permet d'avoir accès à un budget incomparable de 500 milliards de dollars et son objectif est bien entendu de créer 125 000 nouveaux emplois partout à travers le pays. La stratégie est claire. Nous allons augmenter nos exportations de 50 %. Nous allons également augmenter les revenus par 240 %. L'approvisionnement octroyé à des compagnies canadiennes aussi va passer de 43% à 70%. And we will develop IP here, intellectual property here, by Canadians, for Canadians, but also for the world. For too long, Canada has excelled at innovation, but lagged in commercialization and scale. We develop world-class technologies, but too often growth happens elsewhere, and this needs to stop. We will change that, and that's exactly why we have now a very much well-known build, partner, buy approach. So we will build, we will partner, and we will buy. We need Canadian companies growing into global defense leaders, anchoring supply chains at home, creating jobs, and exporting worldwide. And many of you have been doing that work already. Plusieurs d'entre vous faites déjà ce travail. Au Québec, je pense à CAE comme un chef de file mondial de formation et de simulation pour pilotes militaires. En partenariat avec KF Aerospace, en fait de Kelowna, l'entreprise met en œuvre le programme de formation du personnel navigant dans la continuité de l'héritage de plans d'entraînement aérien du Commonwealth britannique. In Ontario, TPS Canada has recently announced the acquisition of advanced jet trainers to expand NATO pilot training capacity in North Bay. In Atlantic Canada, Kraken Robotics is advancing cutting-edge underwater surveillance technologies. And in Western Canada, the Aviland continues a proud aerospace tradition, strengthening our sovereign capacity across civil and defense operations. These companies represent the kind of sovereign industrial capabilities Canada must continue to scale. Now, you heard the Prime Minister this morning, and he outlined three important measures: the industrial and technological benefits policy, which all of you know about, which is the ITB policy, a new strategic partnership framework, and also a defense concierge service. So let me build on that, and I'll expand on these three important measures that were announced today by the PM. First, 3 points on the IPTV policy. And I know a lot of you have been coming to see us at industry and have been working with my team, so I would like to thank you. My point is we've heard you, and we're taking into account a lot of your comments. So my point is the ITB will now be directly tied to our defense industrial strategy. That means that decisions are based on what actually builds Canadian industrial capacity, not all regulatory habits. So concretely speaking, the ITB policy will be applied whether you're building in Canada, whether you're partnering in Canada, or whether we're buying from you, and therefore equipment will be sent to Canada. We want to make sure that the ITB policy applies to everyone. Second, we're making the policy much more strategic with stronger multipliers, including 5 times for companies that expand production or invest in R&D within your company here in Canada. Third, we're making life easier for small businesses because we're applying a 2 times multipliers for using SMEs in supply chains. And also, we now have a 90-day service standard so companies can get predictable decisions. And I know 90 days is still a lot. We'll lower that as well. So, as this applies, of course, across procurement, we will keep refining the policy to make sure that it's a level playing field across Canadian companies, also including Indigenous-owned firms. And I know this is a major concern in the North, as jobs need to be created in the Arctic to also support Arctic sovereignty. So the ITB reforms will also include 10 times multipliers for Indigenous skills and training, and this is the biggest multiplier we will have. So the ITB policy has always been an important tool to create jobs across the country, and we're making it now even better. Thank you, Stephen. Let me cover also our new strategic partnership approach. Et je vous parlerai maintenant de partenariat stratégique. This is about how we work differently and more efficiently with Canadian industry. Strategic partnerships allow us to engage directly with trusted Canadian companies to deliver what the Canadian Armed Forces need. At its core, it's about a continuous, two-way dialogue at the highest levels of trust, with government bringing forward operational needs and industry bringing forward expertise, innovation, and solutions. Ce n'est pas la seule façon de travailler avec le gouvernement, mais c'est vraiment un levier puissant pour accélérer le développement de capacités souveraines. Nous avons mis en place des principes clairs pour guider la sélection de ces partenaires, et donc les voici. Here are the different criteria to be able to become a strategic partner with the government. First, Canadian companies must be, of course, companies must be Canadian, contribute to key sovereign capabilities, and demonstrate strength in development and commercialization. They must have a proven track record of delivering complex projects, creating good jobs in Canada, obviously, and succeeding in global markets, or credible potential to do so. And above all, they must be trusted partners, operating with integrity and in line with Canadian values. When a company is identified as a strategic partner, it sends a clear signal. This is a firm we will work closely with to deliver on Canada's most important defense and security priorities. So this is a national security decision. And we know this is a major shift. We will choose our strategic partners wisely, and decisions won't be taken lightly, and expectations will be great. And finally, let's talk about the third measure, which is the Defense Concierge Service. We will be launching a new concierge service housed at ISED to help Canadian companies, particularly small and medium-sized companies, navigate the system and scale. Parce que nous savons que pour de nombreuses entreprises, le défi n'est pas un manque d'innovation, mais c'est plutôt savoir vers qui se tourner, à qui parler et comment accéder au bon soutien au bon moment. Et ce service a été conçu pour répondre précisément à ce besoin. It will be built on the expertise already within ISED and leverage the accelerated growth service to provide a more coordinated white glove experience for high potential firms. So practically speaking, what does that mean? It's basically helping companies to find their way across government by connecting them to the right programs, services, and decision makers across the ISED portfolio and beyond. It's working also with our regional development agencies. May you be in Atlantic Canada, which is, of course, the important regional development agency there. Same in Quebec, same in the West, same in the North, and same for Northern and Southern Ontario. It's also connecting firms to our Trade Commissioner service to be able to expand to global markets. So this is about making government work better for Canadian companies so that the system is not something that you have to work around, but fundamentally this is something that actually works for you, for companies, in order to be more agile, more responsive, and more connected. So that Canadian firms can do what you do best: innovate, scale, compete, and succeed not only here at home, but on the global stage. Because our objective is absolutely clear. Procurement cannot simply be about purchasing equipment. It must be about building our country. I'll give you an example. Last summer, I traveled to Sweden with Secretary of State Stephen Fuhr to meet Saab and advance the Global Eye Partnership following the first conversations we had had at the Paris Air Show. We worked with Mikael Johansson and his team at Saab and with Eric Martel and his team at Bombardier. We had already the idea of partnership in mind. We wanted to create good jobs in our aerospace sector from coast to coast, anchor an important European player in Canada with Canadian companies, and export to the world. Et donc, on a travaillé de façon très active pour attirer cet important investissement chez nous, pour nous et pour le monde entier. Parce que nous savons que nous avons les meilleurs travailleurs au monde dans le domaine de l'aérospatial, et donc nous avions et nous avons toujours de grandes ambitions. As Minister of Industry, I'm proud to say that this will create over 3,000 jobs at the plant and within the supply chain across the country. And I would like, from the bottom of my heart, to thank the Prime Minister, Minister of Defense, David Menginti, and Secretary of State Fuhr for their work on this. That's where we all clap. So let's also remind ourselves that our defense industrial strategy approach also recognizes the human dimension of the trade war. Because we're using a lot of the defense investments as an economic stimulus to support people. It will support workers and communities as they navigate the impacts of the tariffs, certainly in the auto sector, in heavy manufacturing, in steel and aluminum, by creating jobs for them. And ultimately, this is about more than defense. It is about creating growth. Au cours des prochaines années, le Canada lancera, attribuera, réalisera d'importants projets d'approvisionnement dans tous les domaines plus rapidement que jamais auparavant. Dans son ensemble, il s'agit donc d'un changement fondamental dans la façon dont le Canada aborde l'approvisionnement en matière de défense et sa stratégie industrielle, en passant d'un modèle beaucoup plus fragmenté et réactif à une approche coordonnée, stratégique et axée sur le développement de véritables capacités partout à travers le pays. Our objective is simple and it is ambitious. We want Canada to become once again a serious defense industrial power within the NATO alliance. We want Canadian firms fully integrated into allied supply chains. We want Canadian technology not only developed here, but deployed globally. And we want Canadian workers building the capabilities that will define the next security era. But government cannot do this alone. Of course, we needed to do it together. This is not a short-term initiative. It is a nation-building project for this decade and beyond. And if we get this right, Canada will not only adapt to a changing world, we will be able to shape it. We will be more sovereign in our decisions, more competitive in our economy, more resilient in the face of global uncertainty, and more united in defending our national interests and our values. That is the task before us. Now, let's just do it. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, bonjour tout le monde. Hi everybody. Can you hear me well? Yeah? Okay, good. So happy to be with Stephen Fuhr, the Secretary of State for Defense Procurement. Today, as you know, we announced a major procurement, which is the Global Eye. Stephen will be able to talk about it. Of course, it is an important procurement. Why? Because not only is it important for the Canadian Armed Forces, it is also important for job creation. More than 3,000 jobs across the country. So that's really good news with our European partner. So that shows that our defense industrial strategy is working. I just gave, following the PM presentation this morning, the details on the industrial and technological benefits policy, which is so important, quite technical, but very important for the sector. We presented how we would be working on the new strategic partners approach, so basically how Canadian companies can become strategic partners, and finally gave some details on our new concierge services that will help the small and medium-sized businesses to navigate our system. Donc, essentiellement, bonne nouvelle aujourd'hui, un nouveau partenariat, un nouveau investissement du Global Eye au Canada, donc de SAB et Bombardier qui vont travailler ensemble pour un avion de surveillance, un avion important. Il va y avoir une création d'emplois de plus de 3 000 emplois à travers le pays et mon collègue Stephen Fuhr va pouvoir en parler davantage. J'ai également présenté les détails concernant la politique de bénéfices technologiques et industriels qui est si importante pour le secteur de la défense. Des détails également sur la façon dont nous allons reconnaître ceux et celles qui peuvent devenir partenaires stratégiques dans le contexte de notre stratégie industrielle de la défense. Et finalement, dernier point, les façons de mettre en place le service de conciergerie qui va être si important également pour vraiment soutenir les petites et moyennes entreprises qui cherchent à obtenir des contrats du gouvernement fédéral dans le domaine de la défense.
I think we're open to questions right now because I know you're patiently waiting. Welcome to CANSEC 2026. As you can see, it is unbelievably busy here today. And I think it's a good sign that there's a lot of people that want to work with Canada, a lot of countries. We have lots of friends in all the time zones. And we're thrilled that our great Canadian companies are here showcasing what they can do, not only for the government of Canada, but what they can do for our partners around the world. Who is, just before we start, who is managing?
Who's in managing
Who's
the...
in
Yeah.
So there's a quite Canadian mandate on procurement since last December, but we still see a lot of major procurements in either defense or technology going to multinational international companies. So how is the government going to reconcile different competing priorities?
Yeah, so you bring up a good point, and the reality is one of our biggest enemies here. So we have build, partner, buy. That's what's happening, and the question was like, how is that reconciled with some things that are still moving through the system? The biggest factor that will determine build, partner, buy is time. Now, a lot of things have been in the mill for years, and we're trying to get those things through. We just can't start from scratch on everything. So some of them are complex things that had a lot of work in them. We'll continue on the procurement path they were on, and they'll come out, and they may not necessarily fall into the new strategy, but certainly where we can shape new outcomes and certainly new procurements, we're on the Build, Partner, Buy program.
Yes.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, Mike Blanchfield, Politico,
Yeah.
over here.
Hi.
Hi. Question for both of you. Minister Joly, are you going to be heading to Lockheed Martin anytime soon, given that you've already had a look at Saab, and that's obviously top of mind?
Of course, and I had numerous conversations with Lockheed Martin already because I think they're an important company operating in Canada. Maybe on the much more marine side, or also so Navy side, or also on the aerospace side. And I've had conversations also with the CEO of Lockheed Martin Canada. So yes.
And what's next? I mean, are we going to see a review anytime soon? I mean, David McGinty seems to think it's still ongoing. I mean, people are getting a little impatient. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's a decision that will be taken by the Prime Minister. My job is to make sure that I have, and we have, the best deal for Canada in terms of jobs created in Canada. I've said it many times, and of course, I will say it again. I think we can get more out of the Lockheed Martin F-35 contract. And we've had, I think, constructive conversations with Lockheed to be able to create more jobs across the country. And at the same time, I think it's just normal for us to look at different options. And that is why Secretary of State Fuhr and I were in Sweden last summer, also having a conversation with Saab.
Bonjour, Madame Joly.
Bonjour.
Donc 500 milliards de dollars sur 10 ans dans la défense.
Oui.
Si dans 10 ans, il n'y a pas eu de grands conflits, il n'y a pas eu d'attaque au Canada, est-ce qu'on ne va pas se mordre les doigts, se dire on a investi 500 milliards là-dedans alors qu'on aurait pu mettre cet argent-là ailleurs?
Je pense pas. Sincèrement, je pense pas. Je pense qu'on est dans un monde plus compliqué, plus dangereux présentement, et on prend des décisions basées sur l'information qu'on a présentement. Et donc, ce qu'on sait présentement qu'on doit faire, c'est que, bien entendu, on peut pas contrôler ce qui se passe au sud de notre frontière, ailleurs dans le monde, mais on peut contrôler ce qu'on fait chez nous. Et depuis trop longtemps, le Canada n'investit pas assez en défense. Et donc, on n'est pas le seul pays présentement à investir autant. C'est un engagement de la part de tous les pays de l'OTAN, qui se sont tous engagés l'été dernier au sommet de l'OTAN à atteindre non seulement 2 %, mais 3,5 %, éventuellement 5 %. Donc, c'est un mouvement qui se déploie à travers l'alliance de l'OTAN, qui est bien entendu l'Europe chez nous, mais on le voit aussi ailleurs dans le monde. Donc, je pense que non seulement, si vous me posez la question, quels vont être les impacts de cette stratégie-là, les impacts, je pense qu'ils vont être très positifs. Pourquoi? Parce qu'on va avoir créé des emplois et on va avoir fait en sorte qu'on sait que si jamais un conflit arrive, on va être prêt et on va être capable de se défendre.
Mais contre qui on veut se défendre? Parce que la Chine, on se rapproche économiquement de ce pays-là. La Russie est invitée au Conseil de paix par Donald Trump. Donc, on se demande, c'est qui l'ennemi aujourd'hui si on se rapproche de tous ces ennemis potentiels-là?
Mais écoutez, je ne suis plus ministre des Affaires étrangères ni ministre de la Défense, mais je pense qu'on peut penser qu'il y a plusieurs menaces au même moment qui affectent le Canada. Et parce qu'elle peut être multidimensionnelle, parce qu'elle peut être étatique ou, dans le fond, liée à des mouvements uniques, à ce moment-là, on pourra mieux réagir. Et je pense que de toute façon, un pays ne peut pas être en paix et bénéficier de la prospérité de cette paix-là si on n'est pas capable éventuellement de démontrer une force et de se défendre. Et je vous dis ça en tant que progressiste, et certainement en 2015, quand je me suis lancée, jamais je pensais que j'allais être à CANSEC devant des milliers de personnes dire ce que j'ai dit. Mais aussi, j'ai vu le monde et aussi la géopolitique se détériorer. Et donc, dans les circonstances, je pense que c'est l'approche pragmatique à prendre.
The submarine deal will have an impact on the Canadian economy. Who do you see ahead of the race between Germany and Korea, and what does Germany need to do to get the deal done besides buying energy?
Well, the good news is you're going to find out probably in the next 4 to 5 weeks at the latest. And I want to, so obviously we can't get into where we're headed. That's with the public service, but we are going to have an answer for you by the end of June. That's great. And I want to point out, just generally speaking, this could possibly be the biggest procurement, military procurement Canada has ever done if we add in 12 boats, all the infrastructure, all the things that go along with that. And Canada will have done a competitive process on submarines inside a year. Anybody that works in the space or knows anything about that would probably agree that that is an unbelievable speed to do such a large procurement. So we're really proud about that, and we'll have a specific answer for you very shortly.
And you can say to your readers or public back in Germany that you ask a question that every single Canadian journalist asks us every day.
Okay, but one follow-up. Do you rule out to split the deal?
That question's been asked and answered too. Right now, we're looking for a partner. So that's what we're doing.
AEWC and fighter capabilities are inextricably linked. So how does the selection of Ottawa influence or affect the review about whether to stick with the F-35 or go to a mixed?
It doesn't. An AEWC platform works with all fighter platforms. This is what its job is to do. So whether the current E3 or any of the platforms that exist now, they work with all fighter platforms. So does AEWC. It's a fantastic platform for Canada. I'm sure there'll be other questions about it, but it doesn't influence our direction to go one way or the other with the fighters.
And to add that, on the industrial benefit side, for us it was important to be able to work with a partner to make sure that we could get to our export targets, which is basically we work also with UAE, with France, and we're working with other countries within NATO to be able to not only build it for us, but to export. And so that was also something that was really important in trying to attract this investment to Canada, and of course, working on a procurement for ourselves.
Have you had any discussions with Saab about configuration changes you need to make to integrate with F-35 and NORAD?
Oh, well, it works with that. I mean, Swedish aircraft are working with Norwegian F-35s right now. So these planes are designed to work with under NATO and with multi-fighters, whether they be French or European or American. That's the way these things work.
Hi, question on the strategic partnership framework that you're talking about. Now that you've outlined a lot of the framework, when will we find out who those strategic partners are, and will U.S. subsidiaries qualify under that?
So when we think about a strategic partner, it must be a Canadian firm. What does a Canadian firm mean? It must be a company that is anchored in Canada, obviously a Canadian company. It can be a subsidiary of other companies, but it needs to have a very strong footprint here, and also decision making here within the country. We developed the framework, and we will be working with the Defense Investment Agency, and so with Steve and his team to allocate to whom we want to decide we'll be working as strategic partners. I must say many firms have already approached us, maybe Canadian firms already, or those who have some presence in Canada but are willing to do even more. And so that's part of the conversation. It's not only the footprint they have now, but what they could bring in the context of becoming strategic partners.
So can you just talk a little bit more through that process? You mentioned you'll be working with DIA to figure out who those companies are. Like what exactly, will there be transparency in that process, or what exactly will that look like?
So what we're trying to do is to attract more investments and create jobs. And meanwhile, we want to be able, that's my job because I'm the Minister of Industry, and obviously Steve will answer on the question of defense, working with the Minister of Defense. But what we're trying to do is really to anchor an industrial footprint across the country that will create, how can I say, real trust between companies and the government. So if we have a problem or a threat to deal with, that we can ask that company and that company can offer us options, which is completely different from what we have done in the past. And that is the approach that usually companies and government do in wartime. That is certainly what Ukraine is doing. So they will work with a given company and really have that trusted partnership for them to develop solutions for their own armed forces. That's the idea we want to do. But if we have a strategic partner, we don't need to have a procurement every time. We're able to, basically have that conversation of how we can develop equipment that is needed for the Canadian Forces. And on my side, it's really much more, how can there be intellectual property developed? How can there be research development, also investments? And how can there be more jobs created? And how can the impacts of the tariffs, which are really impacting the auto sector, steel, aluminum, manufacturing, how can we use strategic partners to actually reopen plants that have been closed, or even open new ones, and also be able to transfer workers that have been impacted to be working in these new plants that would be built.
I'd virtually say the exact same thing, so I think we should let somebody else have another question. Thank you for the question.
Bonjour, Christian Noël de Radio-Canada.
Yeah.
Quand il est venu le temps de choisir le Global Eye plutôt que le windshield, par exemple, à quel point les retombées économiques au Canada en général et le partenariat avec Bombardier en particulier a eu un effet dans votre choix?
Énorme, parce que ce qu'on cherchait, c'était d'attirer des investissements pour justement créer des emplois au Canada. On savait qu'on avait des problèmes avec les tarifs, on savait qu'il y avait une possibilité d'impact sur notre secteur manufacturier. Puis en même temps, on trouvait qu'on a un secteur de l'aérospatial qui est très bon, mais qui s'est beaucoup concentré sur les avions commerciaux et un peu sur le militaire, mais on voulait vraiment l'amener à un autre niveau. Et donc, les premières conversations ont eu lieu dans le fond, au Bourget. Donc, j'avais juste le terme en anglais Paris Air Show, mais au Bourget. Donc, à la foire d'aérospatiale de Paris. Et puis, après, Steve et moi, on est allés en Suède, et c'est là qu'on a vraiment plus continué les conversations. Et c'est là que vraiment Bombardier et Saab ont commencé à parler, pas de travailler ensemble, ils travaillaient déjà ensemble, mais vraiment d'attirer des investissements au Canada pour bâtir au Canada pour après exporter les Global Eye ailleurs dans le monde.
Les Américains, les Saab sont en compétition pour un autre gros contrat qui s'en vient, les F-35 de la société Griffin. Et là, pour le contrat des Global Eye, vous venez de choisir leur concurrent. Avez-vous peur de frustrer les Américains, ou est-ce que vous êtes en train de séparer la pauvre en deux?
On le fait pour nous. Donc, on voulait être capable d'avoir cet avion de surveillance-là parce qu'on pensait qu'on allait créer des bons emplois. On pensait également aussi que ça allait être important pour les besoins des forces armées canadiennes. Et une grande partie de l'avion est construite aux États-Unis. Donc, il y a quand même un lien avec les États-Unis. À peu près, le Premier ministre l'a mentionné, à peu près 25% de l'avion est construit aux États-Unis parce que c'est un avion de Bombardier et on sait que, dans le fond, les avions de Bombardier sont construits au Canada et aux États-Unis. I think it's going to be English.
Bonjour, Sandrine Guérin avec Le Devoir. Madame Joly, est-ce qu'il n'y a pas des risques de voir des conséquences ou des répercussions commerciales après cette décision de privilégier ça plutôt que les concurrents américains?
Non, on l'a fait parce que c'était la chose à faire.
Mais
Et puis-
vous ne craignez pas que ça ravive des tensions avec le gouvernement américain?
Nous, notre objectif, c'est d'investir notre argent en défense dans notre monde, chez nous, en prenant des propositions pour nous. Donc, on ne le fait pas en dépit, on le fait pour nous. Et puis en même temps, comme je répondais à votre collègue Christian Noël un peu plus tôt, 25% de l'avion est d'ailleurs construit aux États-Unis parce qu'on sait que Bombardier, sa chaîne d'approvisionnement est au Canada et aux États-Unis. Any other English questions for my colleague?
Yeah.
On the global one,
Yes.
can you talk about the export component of it, but also where will it be built in Canada? Like the mix of how it will all come together, the amount of Canadian content that it has.
Yeah, sure. That's an important question, and one of the things that's very attractive. There's many reasons why this is a very important procurement. How this works right now is the aircraft. They call it a green aircraft, where it's built as an airplane and it's green in color because it's painted later. It's built in Toronto. It's flown to Sweden. It's militarized in Sweden, and then it's sent to the customers. And France is buying this. Sweden already operates it. UAE. And I can tell you, and you'll probably see in the media, and I'll leave it up to individual countries and organizations to announce where they're going, but there is significant interest in this plane, which is another very good thing for Canada. One of the benefits of what we're doing here is not only is this going to be a capability for Canada, but as was mentioned, we want to export from Canada. So there is an opportunity for us, instead of building the airplane in Toronto and flying into Sweden to militarize it, we will be militarizing the aircraft in Canada. So that's all new work. So we get the benefit of selling more of these airplanes. Toronto, the factory there, will build more planes. But then the new work will be militarizing it here in Canada, not only for our own needs, but for export. And equally important, it's a global eye that we have today won't be the global eye that we're flying in 2035. All that array on the back, that's all the guts of that thing, that's like the second generation right now. There's an older version of it, the Erie Eye radar, that's flying around on an old Saab 340. That's the Erie Eye. The one in the global is the Erie Eye ER, and there'll be like an ER squared and an ER quadruple. The bottom line is Canada now can contribute not only to building the entire machine here in Canada, but all the new capability. As the capability is changing so quickly, a lot of that value add can be done here with our SMEs and SMBs, which is another element of this that just makes it that more attractive.
So to be clear, the entire plane will be built in Canada?
The Canadian planes will, and we will also be building for export. Right now, it was talked about earlier, we understand there's at least 40 aircraft that are being looked at, so there's a book of work of 40 aircraft. I would argue that there's probably more. I can't tell you who they are, but this is a very popular capability. A big conflict we just saw over the last month and a half happen in Iran is redefining this capability being very well sought after. So there's lots of airplanes being sought after. Canada can be a big part of building this entire thing and improving it over time, which is exactly what we want.
And can I just add something? The Bombardier jet is actually 25% made in the US. Okay, so when you say the entire plane made in Canada, it is indeed mainly Canadian, but I just wanted to
Yeah, so the components like the array, the Erie Eye, the militarization part, that the work would be done in Canada. The pieces come from Sweden, but the plane built in Canada, in Toronto, about 20-25% are from U.S. components, mostly avionics. I believe the APU, and you guys can look that up. I believe that's American as well. But the bottom line is there's about 20%, 25% content is U.S. All the labor, much of the supply chain exists in Canada. The militarization work will be done in Canada for Canadian aircraft. And remember, whether it be submarines or AEWC, a lot of this capability was identified in the Defense Policy update, which is Arno Strong and Free. But the timelines are further out for both those things I just mentioned than we're delivering. For a whole host of reasons, we've moved the timelines up to meet our new reality. And you can see the government in action, not just with investments, like we're spending a lot of money, but commitment to get the job done. I don't think we've seen a Prime Minister speak at a CANSEC, certainly for long enough that we don't think it's ever happened, and I would argue that it probably hasn't happened. So there is our new agency, we have a strategy, We have commitment from leadership. We have invested money, and we are moving quickly because our situation demands that we do.
That's it.
Sorry? Yeah. So with regard to where it will happen in Canada, so right now SAB's the preferred supplier. Doug Guzman and his team at DIA will work on the term sheet in terms of how much is it going to cost, what the timelines are, and work with Bombardier and SAB to identify where this work's going to go. I will also say that it's also important for us as we make these generational investments in Canada that we make sure, to the best that we can, we spread this work out across the country, east to west and north to south. We have great companies right across the country that want to get involved, and we're going to do the best we can to make sure that they're involved.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.